In this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayeshev, we're introduced to the story of Yosef and his brothers. And Yosef is deeply connected to the idea of Chanukah. And while we're going to develop this in greater depth next week, this week we want to build a foundation of what was the Chanukah story really about. Because we often think that the Greeks were evil and the Jewish people were victorious over the evil Greeks. But if you look at a lot of Jewish literature, there's this paradoxical and contradictory perspective of the Greeks. I mean, if you go back to Parshas Noach gives Shem and Yafes a very interesting bracha. It says, Yafta Elokim Yafes, Hashem should give beauty to Yafes, who is the forefather of the Greeks, V'yishkon ba'olei Shem, and Yafes should dwell within the house of Shem, who's the forefather of the Jews. So it seems that somehow there's supposed to be this harmony between the Greeks and the Jews. And also very, very strangely, the Gemara says that the only language you're allowed to translate the Torah into is Greek, because Greek is a beautiful language, and every other language doesn't have that same beautiful characteristic. And the question is, what's going on here? What is this ideal relationship that's supposed to be between the Greeks and the Jews, and what went wrong? So what do the Greeks represent? The Greeks represent the power of intellect, of science, of philosophy, and the Jews represent a very unique ideology, that there's a fundamental connection between the physical and spiritual. As the Midrash says, Istaklu b'raisa bar alma, Hashem looked into the Torah and created the physical world. The physical world stems from a higher transcendent reality. It's almost like a seed expressing itself, that the spiritual expresses itself into this physical world. And if you want another analogy, think of a projector. A projector, if you look on the screen, you see the image, but where's that image coming from? It's coming from the projector. It's coming from somewhere else. You have to trace it back to its actual root. It might look like everything's real on the screen, but that's not where it's actually happening. And the same thing when it comes to the physical world. The physical world is an expression of the spiritual world. And just think about how you experience life. You don't see people's inner worlds, their emotions, their thoughts. All you see is the physical expression. How they change their facial expressions, the words they say, the actions they do. And the same thing, you don't see the spiritual, but you can understand the spiritual. You can understand how Hashem manifests and expresses himself into the world by looking and understanding the physical, because the physical is an expression of that root. And this was the battle, because the Greeks corrupted that. They said that the intellect and the physical world is disconnected from anything higher, that there's no connection between the physical and the spiritual. And the Jewish people had to battle with that and say, no, there is. As the Ramban famously says, Nachmanides, he says that the Greeks claim that there's nothing that is true unless you can understand it through logic and reason. And if you can't understand it through logic and reason, it's false. And we said that it's true, logic is great, but there's something that's post-rational, transcendent, that's the Torah. And this is the battle, this is the conflict. And ideally, there should have been this Torah-Ramah relationship, this Torah and science, Torah and logic and natural wisdom, where you synthesize the two. And that was the ideal. That's what it should have been with Yafta Elokim Yafes V'yishkon ba'olei Shem. But the Greeks battled and said, no, we don't want that. We want to disconnect the physical from the spiritual. And that's why the battle of Chanukah is really the battle against human intellect as being independent of any higher reality. And that's why Chanukah is the Chag of Torah Sheba'al Peh, because Torah Sheba'al Peh is using human intellect to engage in the creative process of Torah, that which is transcendent. Which is why there's no pasuk for Chanukah, there's no story in Tanakh for Chanukah. You don't even have a Mishnah for Chanukah. Chanukah is really this uniquely Torah Sheba'al Peh holiday, where we really represent the idea of using human intellect, but uplifting it and saying, yes, we can be creative, we can engage in intellectual activities, but we represent this idea that we're connected to something beyond ourselves. It's not all about me. I don't know everything. I'm engaging, I'm trying to learn, but I'm also connecting to something higher. So we should be inspired as we enter into this Chag of Chanukah to really, really connect to this idea of this paradoxical synthesis between human intellect and that which is transcendent.